I haven't maybe seen that piece of it as much, like having these sort of ADD kind of symptoms, like during adolescence. Yeah. I normally the adolescents that come into my office are more dealing with kind of depression and things like that. Yeah. I mean, certainly some of them really do have classic ADHD symptoms, and I don't know if that's attributed to their social, kind of their online presence or not, and all the screens, or if they truly have ADHD. But I definitely think it could be something that will kind of be trending in the future.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, is like, will it be the traditional way that we've seen it, or is that going to adapt and we have to come up with a new explanation for what's happening? And that kind of stuff fascinates me, because it's like we do adapt and change in our like mental presentations, and God only knows. We'll see.
Yeah, I work with a lot of adults that have ADHD. Well, actually, they're getting diagnosed later in life with ADHD, and they didn't, they had no idea that that's what was kind of going on with their brain. And I think for them, their symptoms present very differently than like what it would for maybe a teenager.
Right.
And they're not necessarily spending all this time on electronics. I mean, certainly they might be mindlessly scrolling like we all do.
Yeah.
But their symptoms are really more around like kind of executive functioning, things like that.
Yeah. As best you could on just like a layman's kind of level, how would you describe executive functioning to those who are listening, and just kind of how you're treating that?
Yeah, it's kind of like your ability to kind of problem solve during the day, kind of like your working memory, being able to remember things, being able to kind of have tasks that you're able to like start and then be able to complete, the whole process. There's a lot that goes into kind of our executive functioning, but typically an ADHD person has their functioning skills are less than like somebody who doesn't have ADHD.
Yeah.
So it's a lot harder for them to kind of get things done. For example, you might recognize that you need to do your laundry. And so you're like, okay, well, I got to do laundry, even though it's boring, so I'm going to go do it. Otherwise, I'm not going to have anything to wear. Whereas like an ADHD person, they might really procrastinate on that because it's so boring to them that that's really difficult to get started.
Yeah.
And so they just put it off and put it off and put it off until the last minute. And then all of a sudden their brain kicks into gear and you're like, oh, okay, now I need to get this done, and I can get a lot of stuff done.
Yeah. Well, just the way that you're highlighting that, I think of a client, who I was working with today earlier. And when she first came to me, it masqueraded as severe depression. And like clinicians, we know that will come and go. And if you have that symptomology, it doesn't mean that some of these other things can't exist. But as you're saying, it's like that's exactly how she was describing this work task to me today. And we've talked a lot about, attention type of strategies, because I maybe those listening have run into it, and maybe you've seen it too. It's like it's hard to get an ADHD or ADD diagnosis properly for an adult,
right?
Because there's no one's gonna like use any specific assessment for
right. I don't
for
think
adults.
there even is a formal assessment instrument that's sort of like the go-to standard.
Yeah. It's like all of them are that get used out, like, for someone who is going to do one, they almost mirror like depression symptom assessments. But it's interesting because like I have a client who went to seek the diagnosis, and he went through the full psychological assessment because that's the only thing they could do. And I tried to coach him and educate him on that. It's like, they're not going to sit you down and give you some assessment and be like, this is for ADD and you have ADD. It's like these things are done for children. And if maybe you were in an environment when you were young where you weren't going to therapy or no one was catching these things, it can be real hard in your adult life to sort these things out, and therapy is probably your best option.
Yeah. The good news is that researchers are actively trying to develop an assessment instrument, and so hopefully that will come out in the next few years, and it will make our jobs a lot easier.
Yeah, and from all angles, it'd be nice to be able to assess and know for certain this is or isn't, as best we could. And right now it's kind of like you take 3 or 4 different clusters of symptoms and try to figure out, can we rule all of this out?
Right.
And then that's what's left. And
Right.
yeah,
It's challenging,
yeah,
right? Because things present so differently. So, my mind is racing and I can't stop thinking about things and I just have a million thoughts in my head and I'm really restless. Well, that also sounds like anxiety.
right.